Hello, welcome in. My name is Nancy, and on this channel, I talk about family life, homeschool, things of that sort. But today we're going to talk about something a little bit different. I recently had a lumbar puncture, which is also known as a spinal tap. It's a diagnostic procedure in which a doctor or a radiologist, a radiology tech, yeah, radiology tech, or a doctor inserts a long, thin needle in a very specific area of the back in order to draw out cerebrospinal fluid to have it tested. And it's usually performed when there is suspicion of multiple sclerosis, commonly known as MS, or lupus. If one has leukemia, they might also have this procedure done. If there's suspicion of meningitis, things like that. I am not a doctor. I am not a doctor. This is not any kind of medical video or anything like that. I want to put that disclaimer out there that this is just my personal experience as a patient having the lumbar puncture done. And so in my case, it was not a doctor that performed my procedure, but he did it under the direct observation of a doctor. I was told before I had the procedure done, I was told that I would likely have the worst headache that I have ever had. I was told that it was possible that I might have slight confusion for several hours after having the test. I was also told that I could feel a little dizzy, woozy, and that the site where they inserted the needle would hurt a lot. Other people had said that it didn't hurt so bad. There were some people that had told me that whenever they gave you the numbing shots, that was the worst part of it. And when they inserted the actual needle that would withdraw the fluid, you wouldn't feel it. And you wouldn't feel it when they removed it. You wouldn't even know that it was there. It wouldn't bother you. And then there were other people that said that they had felt the entire procedure. What the doctors told me that ordered the test was that I would have a headache for at least a day or two after. But if I had a headache more than 2 days after, then I should give a call. They told me that it was possible that I would be slightly confused directly following the procedure for, just a couple of hours until the brain replenished that cerebrospinal fluid, which takes up to about 6 hours is what they told me. And so I would be in recovery for a couple hours following the procedure. Y'all, I didn't have any of that. Thanks to God, I didn't have the headache that was mentioned. Didn't have any confusion whatsoever. I was brought into a recovery room soon after having the procedure, and my husband was allowed to be in the room with me as I laid in one position. I wasn't able to move. Excuse me. I wasn't able to change positions after having the procedure done. They wanted me to lay flat, no matter whether I was on my back or whether I was on my side. They told me it didn't matter. But as soon as the procedure was completed, they had me roll over onto a bed, and they told me that I had to lay in that particular position for the next couple hours. And then when I was released, They told me to take it easy at the house. You don't have to stay flat in the bed for 2 days, but we want you to rest for a couple days. And they told me that I needed to lie in that same position or lie flat at least for a few hours once I got back in my house. And then after that, I was free to get up. I could stand up, I could walk around, but don't do any heavy lifting, don't do any strenuous activity, anything like that for a few days. And so basically just, light duty for a few days after. Now, my experience was that I had pain in my back when they gave me the injections to numb the area. The first shot that they gave me was like an electric static, or like a lightning bolt shot from my spine down to my knee on the left side. So I felt it go all the way down. The person that did my procedure said that was basically inevitable, that everybody kind of felt a lightning jolt. And then the second shot, it felt like a bee sting. And then I believe there was three shots altogether. The third one I really didn't feel. When they inserted the actual needle that drew the fluid, I felt, I could feel it going in. I guess you would say pressure. I could feel it going in. It didn't hurt necessarily. It was uncomfortable, but it didn't hurt. And then I could tell every single time that he changed vials. They removed 6 vials of fluid during my particular procedure. And I felt it every single time that he changed vials. It felt like there was like twisting and turning going on at my spine. So I could tell when he was doing that. And I asked him the second time that I felt it, I said, "You're changing the little vial, aren't you?" And he said, "Yes." And he said, "You shouldn't be feeling anything though. You're good and numb." But I felt it. I also started to feel that I had something in my back about halfway through. I was told that the procedure would take roughly about 30 minutes, but that it depends on each individual. It just depends on how quickly that the cerebral spinal fluid is drawn. So, everybody's body is different. But mine took about 10 to 15 minutes is all. It was only about 10 to 15 minutes, so it wasn't a long time. But it was an uncomfortable while there was twisting and turning going on. Pain, discomfort, I would say, discomfort. And then as they removed the needle, I felt it. I know many people say they don't feel anything, but I felt it when they removed the needle. You know how when they put an IV in your hand or put an IV in your arm to give you intravenous fluids or something like that, or medication intravenously, you feel it when they remove the needle. And sometimes that can be kind of the worst part of having an IV. I mean, it's not so much the pinch as it goes in for some of us, but it's the removing of that needle. And so for me, the removal of this thin, long needle in my back as they were removing that needle from having the lumbar puncture, that was, I wouldn't say the worst part, but probably the second worst. It was probably the second worst. So the first day that I got home, of course, we had to leave the kids somewhere because, my kids are young enough they couldn't be at the hospital, ages 7 and 9. So at the hospital where I went, they said that the kids would have to be 12 or older to be in the outpatient area. And so my kids were not allowed in the outpatient area, so we had to leave them with my sister. And so she lives like about 30 minutes, I guess, 35 minutes from the hospital where I had the procedure done. So we had to drive 35 minutes to go pick up the kids, and then we came back through town to go back to my house, back to our house. And that ride was rough. That ride was very rough. I didn't want to be in the car. It hurt, and I couldn't put my back all the way to the back, to the chair. I couldn't put my back against the chair in the car and against the seat in the car. So I was kind of hunched over and grabbing the seat the whole way, and that was a rough ride. And so then when we got home, I went ahead and ate something because I wasn't allowed to eat for about 3 hours prior to the procedure, which is not a big deal. Not a big deal. But, then I'd stayed at the hospital for a couple hours, so I was a little hungry by the time I got home. Even though I was in pain, I was still a little bit hungry. So we picked up some food on the way home, so nobody would have to cook or anything like that. We just picked up something on the way home. And I ate, and then I went straight to bed. I couldn't stay in the chair very long. I realized that about 20-30 minutes in the chair, that's about all I could do. And so I got up, went to bed, laid down on my side, laid down flat for the next couple hours, and then I would get up and walk around and go sit down, and then back to the bed. I was chair to bed, chair to bed, chair to bed for the next 2 days. Now, I actually had a flare-up of my symptoms 3 days prior to having the procedure done. And so I think that weighed in a little bit, or a lot, on me experiencing more pain after having the procedure done. I know a lot of people said that after 2 days they were good to go. That was not the case with me. As far as, staying at home and sitting and standing, whatever, I was good to go after the first couple days. But as far as getting out and going somewhere, or I don't work outside the home. I'm a minister in my church, and then I'm a homeschool mom. And so I don't work outside the home. I'm not doing heavy lifting or anything like that outside the home. But I can say that if I was working, I don't know that I'd be able to work the first few days after having the lumbar puncture. Everybody says the doctor lets you go back to work after 1 or 2 days, but unless you're sitting at a desk, I don't see how. Okay? So if you're a doctor and you're listening to this, if there's anything that y'all could do about that, I'm sure some people would really appreciate it, which you may not be able to. That's probably the doctor's board that decides all that. But anyway, I don't think I'd be able to work, during those first few days. But so I had it done on a Thursday, and by Saturday I was up washing dishes and doing just a little bit, in the house. But of course, with whatever sickness is affecting my body right now, I have a great amount of fatigue and pain within the first few days to a week of the episodes of the cycles. And so I was experiencing that as well as the pain from the procedure. Forgive me if I am slurring my words together or anything like that. That's also one of the symptoms that I'm still dealing with. So forgive me for that. I realize I'm putting some words together a little bit today. I'm sorry. My lumbar puncture came back fine. There were a couple things that were a little bit elevated. but nothing that would indicate multiple sclerosis. That's what my test was done for. They were checking for multiple sclerosis. And so I thank God for that. I thank God that, it wasn't multiple sclerosis that is causing my symptoms. We are still in a waiting process to find out what is actually causing the symptoms. And so I've had my follow-up with the nurse practitioner, and we'll be going for an EEG as well as an EMG, nerve conduction test. And so that's the next step for me. I know, like I said at the beginning of the video, different people have the lumbar puncture for different reasons. But for me, it was that. I'm having a lot of symptoms that are very similar to multiple sclerosis symptoms. But we thank God it wasn't that. But still looking for answers. And so on Sunday, so that is Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that is 3 days after having the procedure. I didn't take any notes. I'm just doing this straight from memory, and probably should have wrote something down. But by Sunday, I did actually go to church just because I wanted to get out of the house. I really didn't feel like going to church, if I'm completely honest. But I did go, and I sat down for part of the time, and then I stood up for part of the time, and then I would go back to the chair, and I was back and forth. So, and I did bring a Gatorade with me just for hydration to make sure that I didn't, get that headache, because even though the doctor said that the first couple days you might have a headache, a lot of people that had the procedure done had said that they didn't get the headache until a couple days later after they started back their normal activities. And so I was conscious of that and brought me a Gatorade to church. And I think that really helped me to prevent having the headache. I did Gatorade up for a couple days prior to having the procedure performed, and I did drink, a little bit of extra fluids, whether it be Gatorade, water, things of that sort, juice, but mostly Gatorade and water, But I made sure that I had at least 2 Gatorades per day for a few days leading up to the procedure. And I do believe that helped to prevent the headache. And so, that's a tip for you. If you are about to have a lumbar puncture done, I would suggest that you do drink fluids. Again, I'm not a doctor, and you will be restricted for 3 hours at least before you have the procedure done. So keep that in mind. You won't have anything to eat or drink for at least 3 hours prior. Another thing that the technician that did my procedure told me was that in other hospitals they use a larger needle to do the procedure. But he said that he liked to use a smaller needle, a thinner needle, because he believed that even though it took a little bit longer to draw the fluid, it would prevent having that bad headache after. So he said that he did as much as possible to keep the patient comfortable and keep them from having that symptom, because that was one of the worst symptoms. So I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And that may have played a big part in it. And like I said, they said 30 minutes for the procedure. Mine was 10 to 15 minutes. So did the smaller needle really make that big of a difference in the time? Probably not. All right, so that was my experience with the lumbar puncture. If there is something that I left out and, you want to know more information, you can definitely leave me a comment below. I will try to answer you as much as possible to the best of my ability. One thing before I go, I just thought about I couldn't drive. I could not drive for a week after having the procedure. And that's why I said, I don't understand going back to work, as soon as having the procedure, unless mine was just really worsened because of having a relapse right before I had the test done, which is possible. But it was mostly at the insertion site. And so I don't understand. But I know that's the way it is. Get them in and get them out. That's the way it is now. When you have a procedure done, when you have surgery done, whatever you have done, it's get them in, get them out these days. Things aren't the way they used to be. So I will say that for the first, I actually wanted to leave my house and go pay bills on Monday, I believe, after having the procedure. So 4 days after having the procedure. I attempted to leave my house. It might have been Tuesday, not sure. So 4 or 5 days after having the procedure done, I attempted to leave my house. And I didn't make it very far down the road before I was nearly in tears. And so it was very uncomfortable being in the driver's seat. I was okay being in the passenger seat. I said I went to church on Sunday. I was okay being in the passenger seat with my husband driving because I was able to. You can turn like this. You can turn like this. But when you're driving, it's kind of a little difficult to be turning and driving at the same time, So that was my deal with that. But I tried again the next day to finish paying the bills. Same thing. Left for every bit of 15, 20 minutes and just driving 10, 15, 20 miles an hour. We live in the city, so it was okay. Small town here, so it was okay to drive 20 miles an hour. But if you don't live in a city like that to where you can drive 20 miles an hour, you might not want to drive that first week after having it done. But everybody's different. Everybody's different. And so I just wanted to get my story out there because I watched videos like this before I had my procedure done to help me to understand what might happen when I had my procedure. And like I said, I didn't have all the side effects that everybody said. And then I did have a little bit of extra pain that hardly anyone said. So that's why I wanted to get this information out there. My experience. This is my personal experience of how the lumbar puncture affected me. Not a doctor, not saying this will be your experience. I hope yours goes well. And I hope you get the results that you're looking for. I don't want to say that I hope everything's negative because as a person that is in your position of having symptoms and very few answers, I wish you the best. And I pray that you get the answers that you are looking for, the answers you deserve, in order to get treated for your symptoms. And not just treat the symptoms, but treat the issue. Because I've had symptoms for over 7 years, and the doctors have treated the symptoms, but I have not encountered exactly what is the problem in order to fix the problem. And when you're suffering, when you're hurting, and they're passing you off and telling you it's probably just depression, probably just anxiety, you have a lot of stress going on. Let's give you this, let's give you that. Nothing's working. And you know that it's not just stress. You know that it's not just depression. You know that it's not just anxiety. Because you feel fine mentally. Except the fact that you can't find answers. And that is stressful. And that is depressing. And that does make one anxious when you can't find answers. And I know many of you are in that same boat. So I want to encourage you today. There is hope, and I believe that you will find the answers that you're looking for. I believe I'm going to find the answers that I'm looking for very, very soon. because I serve a big, big God. And I know that He's got me covered. And so I pray for you that you will seek His presence, and in all of your looking for answers, depend on Him, rely on Him, trust in Him. We see all these TikTok videos and things, trust the process. Well, don't trust the process. The process hurts when you're talking about this kind of a process. Process hurts, process stinks, but God has control at the end of the day, and He's going to get you through. And so if you came over here not looking for God to be involved in this, you came to the wrong place. Because over here I am a Christian and I'm not ashamed of it. So in everything that I speak, everything that I do, God is involved. Because I'm a child of God. God bless you, and thank you so much for listening to my story. No matter if I got my words a little bit mixed up, no matter if I took a little bit too long, longer than what I intended. Thank you so much for listening, and share this out so others will know what they might be able to expect when they have their lumbar puncture done. Have a wonderful and blessed Tuesday. Thank you so much for joining. Bye-bye.